I try, as best I can, to approach my reviews in an unbiased way and look at the film's objective merits, to judge a film as being good or bad based on the film without any reference to who made it or who is watching it. Stanley Kubrick's reputation does not make him invulnerable to criticism, and his film will be judged on its own merits, reputation be damned.
This is a ludicrous statement, Matthew. We're not talking here about a movie like Pandorum, which came out this year and has had zero cultural influence. We're talking about a film made by not one but two geniuses that came out over 40 years ago that has had an immense influence on both the art form of film and the culture as a whole. But even before I dig into the meat of this problem, there's a big error on your part that needs serious attention. Objective merit? What are you, an engineer? Do you work in a law firm? Objective merit doesn't apply here at all. Objective applies to reality and fact. Subjective, on the other hand, applies to concepts within the mind only. The objective merit of a bridge is that it will allow you to cross a river. The objective merit of a law is that it protects you from something. I mean, what exactly are you claiming here? 2001's merits or worth are subjective, which is why you are free to give a negative review in the first fucking place. It is your subjective opinion that 2001 lacks sufficient merit to warrant you liking it. Fine, good for you. But if it had objective merit only, there would be nothing to debate. Now, it is of course possible to have an objective opinion about a subject, but in order to qualify, that opinion must be based on reality, or an established fact. And the fact is, Matthew, that you don't like 2001 because you think it's boring, and you think it's about nothing, relegating your opinion to subjective only. Example, juror number 9's objective opinion is that the defendant is guilty based on the case evidence presented. However, juror number 9's subjective opinion is that the defendant seems creepy to her. And it gets worse. 2001, when you do take into account the reputation that you bedamned along with its massive cultural influence, which are things that you've refused to reference, then it does in fact possess objective merit after all, as a result of its undisputed positive influence on movie making since its release. An example of an objective merit of 2001 would be that it directly influenced the film career and special effects usage of George Lucas in the original Star Wars trilogy, based on statements made by George Lucas and his special effects team. You have therefore claimed, literally, that you are going to review 2001 based on merits that you are not going to review 2001 based on. You see what I mean by sloppy here, Matthew? I mean, I sort of see what you're trying to attempt to say, but you're just so all over the map, and it's a useless exercise anyway, man. 2001 does not exist within a vacuum, and even if it did, you cannot help bringing your own tastes and biases to the table. Like, say, for instance, the bias towards a faster-paced movie, or, I don't know, the bias towards spoon-fed plot elements, for instance. We're not in a court of law here, Matthew. We're not in a laboratory. It's a friggin' movie review. To say that you're going to be objective, which isn't possible, and then to do nothing but repeat your own subjective opinion in the whiniest manner possible for the entire review is both intellectually dishonest and just plain rude, man. Moving on. It is exceedingly unfair and near impossible to review 2001 without taking into consideration all of the other factors surrounding the film. Imagine, if you will, showing a modern-day teenager an episode of I Love Lucy. It's fairly safe to say that that teenager's review of I Love Lucy would be that it was boring, unfunny, unrelatable, and what's with the black and white would probably come up too. Does it therefore follow that that teenager's review of I Love Lucy is fair and correct? Of course not. But in order to understand why the teenager is wrong, we absolutely have to take all other factors, such as place in history, influence on comedy, influence on television, etc., into consideration, or we just end up looking like a jerk to those around us who do understand these factors. But even if this strategy were somehow feasible, and it's not, you self-invalidate it by failing to take into account the reasons why 2001 has such an impeccable reputation as a film in the first place, because of its merits as a film. The people in the 60s who thought it was a masterpiece weren't made biased towards its greatness by its undeserved reputation as officially good. They thought it was great all on their lonesome, and so did an entire generation of movie makers, hence its reputation. You then go on to make a rather slippery compliment regarding Kubrick as a director, stating the true but obvious, that he was ahead of his time, and that you have no quarrel with those who like 2001 based on its cinematography and its direction. A quick objection here. The pacing of a film is the direct result of the director's vision for that film, so you do actually have a problem with people who like 2001 based on its direction. But moving on. You then make the insane assertion that Stanley Kubrick sucked balls as a writer. First of all, there's no need to ad hominem attack the man, but secondly, you fail to back this outrageous claim up with any evidence. You are, of course, entitled to your own opinions regarding what you personally judge to be good or bad script writing. But as I've stated before, and I'm sure I'll have to state again, you have to back that up with more than personal opinion and unwarranted insults. I personally think that Stanley Kubrick was an exceptional writer of films. What's my evidence for this opinion? The films he wrote. Are you actually saying that you think Dr. Strangelove, and Clockwork Orange, and Full Metal Jacket, and Barry Lyndon, and Lolita, and The Shining were badly written? I have no response to that, because none is required. Then just for good measure, you throw in one more insult, that being Kubrick's films are mainly style over substance. When one truly takes into account the rather awe-inspiring substance that films such as Spartacus and Clockwork Orange and 2001 and Strangelove and Eyes Wide Shut and so on attempted to tackle, one can't help but wonder what further substance is required to satisfy somebody like you. I mean, my God, man, here is a film director, in earnest, attempting to examine, without preaching or spoon-feeding, some of the deepest moral, political, emotional, and philosophical puzzles that have haunted mankind since our capacity to tell stories evolved in us in the first place. And because his films are gorgeous, yet difficult for you to comprehend, he therefore is style over substance? So, I'm just going to try and wrap my head around your logic here, see if you can follow along. Kubrick was, in your opinion, the greatest director of all time and ahead of his time in terms of filmmaking. However, he was a suckballs writer whose films, widely considered masterpieces, each and every one, weren't just badly written, but were also style over substance, and the worst of his films, epitomizing his inability to write and his preference for fluff over meaning, was 2001, which just so happens to be not only the primary movie that established his undisputed status as the greatest director of all time, and him as being ahead of his time in the first place, but also has generated over 40 years of scientific and philosophical discussion, making him the envy of nearly every film director alive then and now. Matthew, I shudder to think what you might say about a director that you don't like. Look, saying someone is great and then slinging incoherent, self-contradictory insults at them immediately afterwards just makes you look bad, man. I mean, decide that you're going to make sense and then do your best to stick to that decision. Your next statement should truly embarrass you as a movie lover and amateur film critic. Let's go to the tape.
2001, A Space Odyssey is an anti-movie. A movie with nothing happening, nothing being said, and nothing being done. A movie that is literally about nothing.
Oh, okay, I see your problem here. You think that just because the movie seems to be about nothing to you, therefore it must be about nothing, because how could a deeper meaning possibly slip by someone who has the word confused in his name? There is not nothing happening in this movie, and it is definitely not literally about nothing. In actuality, it's about more than most films or stories ever could be or attempt to be about. My guess is that your ego is attempting to compensate for your intellect's inability to put down your complaint notebook and pay attention.